there, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren. Please rate and review, guys. I ask you that all the time. Please really do it this time. All right, and I'm joined by Trina Julian. She started a landscaping company in 2015 with the purpose of building it and selling it. Trina saw it as the fastest way to 10x her income and get off the economic floor, and it worked. Now she's building an online business because Trina wants to live abroad and have more freedom to travel the world. So she started Trina Julian, the company, earlier this year. Her vision is to instill belief in all people that they can design the life they want. Follow her on Twitter at Trina Julian and sign up for the best weekly sales tips to 10x your income at trinajulian.com. Trina, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Our goal for today is to make adulting easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So today, Trina, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship generally. So in your bio, I wanted to ask, what does economic floor mean?
Economic floor is basically my way to describe, like, I basically had nothing when I started. I was a barista. I graduated from college in 2009 and there were no jobs. And then living in an area where it's mostly hospitality, I just went back to what I was doing in college, and I was making minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, and tips, and had no assets, nothing to really help promote me in life. So that's what I meant by economic floor. I was ground level.
Why did you choose a landscaping business?
That's funny. Definitely not something I ever thought I would do. As I was building it, I'm like, I never thought in a million years I would be a landscaper or own a landscape company. But I always gardened. So since 2019, I was really into living a sustainable life, growing my own food. So I always had vegetable gardens, and I like to grow flowers just because it adds cheer to the vegetable garden. And talking about it to my customers at the coffee stand, I had people that are like, come plant flowers for me. Like, I want flowers in my yard. Please help me out. And I was like, I don't know what to charge. I don't know. I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, they're like, well, just show up and bill me what you think it's worth. Okay. So that's how it started.
So barista as lead generation.
Yes, it was great lead generation.
Interesting. Okay.
So I started, my first year, I think I did $10,000 in revenue. And that was just I think I started in April and worked till like June. And it was just part-time. And then my goal was to be full-time by the time I turned 30, and which was, I was 29 at the time. So, I wanted to be full-time by 30. And that happened. It's funny because I put my 2 weeks notice in at the coffee stand on my 30th birthday. So that worked out. And then the second year I think I billed out like $175,000. Yeah. And then from there, it just grew. I just basically saw a need. People started asking me to help. And then when I got the grip on like how to bill it and how to run it, I just ran with it. And it grew at least 100% every year for the first 4 years. And I never looked back.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I never loved it. That was the thing. I did it because I saw there was a need and I could make money. It wasn't something that it was always meant to be a stepping stone business, is what I called it, because I knew I didn't want to manage and own a landscape company for very long. It's a very difficult business.
I'm glad you said the landscaping business is difficult, because as a short-term rental host on the west coast of Florida, it is difficult to hire them sometimes.
Yes.
And keep them. And so I can only imagine what is going on in the background of this business. And I think it's fascinating that you started it as a side hustle. At what point, and then you wanted to go full time, but like at what point are you like thinking about scale and packaging the business to sell it?
For me, it was right away. From day one, I was like, I'm either going to build my way out or buy my way out, meaning I'm going to build it to run without me, or I'm going to make enough money that I don't need it anymore and I'm going to start investing in other things. And I kind of did both. I wanted to do it in 5 years and it took me 8. But from day one, I hired my first employees as soon as I went full time. So it was a right out of the gate idea.
Was there any part of building the business that was easier than you thought it would be?
No, definitely
What
not.
part? What parts were harder?
Everything. Um, Managing people is the hardest job on the planet. And, making sure it was a lot of self improvement on my part because it's not that people suck or that people aren't good. It's that I had to be able to communicate clearly what I needed them to do. And so I had to do a lot of work on myself and my communication style. I pretty much studied constantly. Like I was listening to podcasts while I'm at the gym, while I'm driving. I was reading books every single day whenever I had a couple minutes. I just crammed my brain full of stuff to figure out how to manage people because really that's what owning a business is. It's managing people and assets, resources. And that's challenging. So, the actual operations of the business was easy, but that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I didn't want to be planting flowers or managing people to plant flowers or even doing bids and sales. Like, I'm more of an investor. So, the ultimate goal is investor, which is why I thought being on your podcast would be cool because there's so much personal finance to it. And my main goal was to become an accredited investor, which I did this year. So that's awesome.
Congrats.
But yeah, everything was harder. I remember being 3 years in and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just figuring it out as I go. And it was a good learning lesson. I wouldn't trade it. I look back and now that I've sold the business, I realize how heavy it was. When I was in the day to day of it, like it was just what I did. It was just there. But now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, my life was really not what I wanted it to be during that time.
So you've set me up really well for my next question, and I'm going to use a interesting example here. And we hear about this with, say, even the most richest dudes in the world. We're talking like Bezos and Elon Musk. Every now and then you hear it like Bezos is selling his Amazon stock and Elon Musk is selling his Tesla stock. These people are business owners and they're diversifying away a little bit from their business. And I think for small business owners, this could probably be even more important because it is, I would assume, a huge percent of your net worth at some point.
Yes, it was definitely the majority of my net worth. But because I was building my way out or buying my way out, both at the same time, I was not paying. I lived off of very basic, average income. I would pay myself a salary that was $4,000 a month. And
Wow.
that's what I lived off of. And I took all the excess and I started investing it. So, I have investments in, like crowdfunding stuff and stock market stuff, real estate. I kind of just threw a bunch of money at the wall and saw where it worked. And I spent, 3 years doing that. And now I feel like I'm in a spot where I've narrowed in on what I like to invest in, how I like to, get my dollars to work for me. And so I started getting other streams of income right away.
What's an accredited investor?
So by definition, which I keep thinking they have to change this at some point, but it's if you
Right.
have $1 million in net worth or more, or if you make, I think, $200,000 or more a year. And it's not like you can register and get a, certificate or anything like that. It just means that when I go to invest in something, I can invest as an accredited investor. And I believe they'll want stuff from me to prove that I am, but it opens up opportunities that basic investors don't have because it shows that I know enough to make a little bit more maybe riskier decisions.
Yep. That's a good definition. And yeah, so I think it's like $1 million invested, and yeah, or
Mhm.
some kind of salary for 2 years. And
Yep.
technically, I think you can get a CPA to write a letter for you, or something
Mhm.
like that. I've
Yep.
also heard cases where you can kind of be like, I'm an accredited investor, and people kind of in some cases take your word for it. But yeah, so what Trina's talking about, there are, for example, the example that comes to my mind are syndications, so real estate
Mhm.
syndications.
Yep.
And that means what they're trying to avoid is someone who has maybe never invested in the stock market, never had a rental property, never done any of that. And then someone comes over them, maybe a slick salesperson is like, I have this real estate syndication. I want you to give me $5,000 for it. In a
Mhm.
lot of instances, it's required that accredited investors be the only people that can invest in these things, because we don't want unsophisticated investors or new investors getting taken advantage of. So this idea, somebody drew a line in the sand, was like, if you have $1 million of, investments, or you make $200,000, you're automatically sophisticated. And I don't know that that's true, but I guess we've got to draw the line somewhere. And I do like the idea of being an accredited investor. That definitely crossed my mind when we first hit it. But then it's like, I truly thought you have to like register it or something
Right.
that you're like
Yeah.
accredited. You don't sort of
I
just raise
mean,
my hand and be like, I'm an accredited. It's like I declare bankruptcy. That's kind of what it's like. I am accredited. You kind
yeah.
of can just say it.
I thought the same thing, actually. I reached out to my CPA and was like, hey, what do I do now that I'm here? Like, and he's like, well, nothing. You just can now look at investments that are that require you to be accredited. And I'm sure most of them ask for some sort of proof of
Right.
that. But there might be some that don't. I don't know.
Okay. I just Googled the word accredited, and it says officially recognized or authorized.
Right.
That
So
makes
there
it
should
sound
be
like
something.
like it's an ordained thing when it's not.
I
Uh,
know. I feel cheated.
so I'm gonna skip to a question that I had about goals.
Okay.
And since it's like late November now, and we're probably, a lot of people are thinking about 2024, and it's a time of year that a lot of people are thinking about goals. And so I wanted to ask you about your goal setting process, but also curious about goals changing. And I think you hitting the accredited investor thing, you're hitting that goal. Did you immediately like set another one, or were you like, I'm good with that? Or, just, if you could just talk a little bit how goal setting works on the other side of hitting some of these goals, like becoming an
Mhm.
accredited investor and selling your landscaping business.
Mhm. Well, it's funny because every goal I've ever set for myself, I have hit like on the dot to a T. And even when I put in my 2 weeks notice on my 30th birthday, I use a thing called a one-page strategic plan,
Mm.
and it really helps to just narrow in on one main goal. So I focus on one big goal, usually 3 years out. And then I work backwards from that. And this one page strategic plan makes you really focus on what the important things are. And then you set action items behind them. So, I mean, I have lots of goals, but they're all based around one big goal. And I think that's important because if you have too many goals, you don't know what to focus on, you can't prioritize. So, yes, as soon as I hit a major goal, I immediately set the next one.
So
Does that
what's
answer your question?
Well, yeah, but the follow-up question is, what's on the plan right now?
Um, I want to live in Arizona from January through March. So that is the goal, which, led me to selling my landscape company. And technically it was running without me. I had an operations manager, but it was still a lot of weight on my shoulders. I had all my employees, I had 20. They were all still my responsibility. It was still my responsibility to make sure jobs were getting on the schedule. Like it was a lot, even though I was showing up 1 day a week for an hour just to have a meeting with my operations manager. So I'm like, I just, in order to do what I want to do and to live, to not be confined geographically, I need an online business. So I sold my landscape company, which it was ready. I was still fighting to get it to a certain spot, and I could have, but I was like too focused on wanting to move on to the next thing. So I just kind of called it. And I need to have an online business to be able to live in multiple places in 1 year. So that's the goal. What's stopping me at the moment, honestly, like I probably could do it right now if I wanted to, but it wouldn't be nice. It would be kind of a scramble, and I don't like to scramble. I like to be comfortable. And so yeah, that's the next goal, is to live somewhere else part-time.
What are you applying from your landscape business to your online business?
Well, I one thing is I don't want the way that I decided what to do next business wise was I measured how many employees do I need to reach $1 million in revenue.
Hmm.
And I think the more employees you need to get to $1 million in revenue, the harder the business is. It's challenging to get to $1 million in revenue with the service business. I
Yeah.
know that when I reached that, I didn't feel like it was very much, but when I would go to events, people are like, wow, you know how hard it is to get past $1 million in revenue? I was like, well, it's really hard because I did it. I know. So that was kind of what I was looking at. Was online you have more leverage opportunities and more reach. It's just more scalable, and it doesn't require you to show up anywhere every day. So what I'm taking from the landscaping business to that is hiring freelancers. I'm hiring, people who are working per job, or I have people writing blogs for me because I like to write, but also not when I'm forced to. So, hiring is a big thing, and knowing that was probably the biggest, most valuable skill I learned running the landscape company, was how to hire
Yeah.
and how to know what people to put in what places.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good to great from that book, right? It's not just
Mm-hmm.
having the right people on the bus, it's having them in the right seats, I think is
Yep.
what he says. I'm probably butchering that. It's been years. But I wanted to also highlight something that you said, and I recognize this more from watching my husband run his engineering firm than with, my career or Adulting is Easier House Money Media. But it's the amount of responsibility that owners feel to pay their people so they can support their families. I think a lot of people think of business owners as sitting up there not paying any attention to their businesses, driving around in their Lamborghinis. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think people understand how often my husband and I are having discussions around the dinner table, or he'll get out of the shower and say something to me, and I could tell he was thinking about it and thinking about them. And what if the economy turns? What if this happens? What if this happens? We got to be thinking about this. Maybe we should pick up another line of business so that we're ready. And it's just, there is a weight to it. And I was glad to hear you say that. And I just wanted to highlight that for listeners as well.
Yeah, it's true. And that was, the same thing. Like I definitely had that persona, I guess, where my employees just thought I really didn't do anything. And,
Ugh,
you know, I don't know what they thought, but I definitely had that. And, it's just more the internal weight of it for sure that is always, always there.
even if you were sitting on a mountain of coins, or swimming through coins like Scrooge McDuck, or driving a Lamborghini around. By the way, my opinion is that's your prerogative. It's your
Yeah.
company. I guess if that's really what this company allows you to do, form another landscaping business and compete with me, and you go do it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, no judgment against those who do it. And it was an internal battle. And I think it comes down to personality type. And I think most entrepreneurs want to do good for others, and they really do serve others. I think there are some out there that, just make heaps of money and kind of are like Scrooge McDuck, but I think most aren't. I think most really internalize it and, you know, care about their employees as if they were family, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's what business is. It's finding a need, creating something that has value, and then people pay you for it. I mean, at the very most basic level, if you're not providing value to people, generally you don't just get money for nothing. It's not
Right.
really how that
Yeah, you
works.
have to have some sort of exchange there. It's funny though, because as I grew with my company, starting out, I was transactional, like install the landscape, get the money, move on. But
Yeah.
as I grew the company, it became more of like, I'm an employer above all else. Like
Yeah.
my job is to employ people, and then my job is to landscape. And my main focus was on always on my people, like making sure they have what they need. And the landscapes always came second.
Yep. So my last question is going again back to your bio that I read at the beginning of the episode. You mentioned you want to spend time in Arizona, but in your bio, we talked about living abroad. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that goal is and why.
Oh, yes. And it's kind of one of those things that, like, if I wanted to do either of those, I could do them right now at the very moment. But I feel like I want to be set up for it. I'm, as an investor, investments get less risky as you educate yourself around them. So my mom's 83 and I cannot live abroad right now. Like I won't leave her at this
Yeah.
point to do that because I'm cherishing every last day because I don't know. At 83, it could, she might not be here tomorrow. It might be another decade. I don't know. So
Yeah.
my goal with that, it's kind of a moving target right now because the goal is there, but I'm not gonna leave my 83-year-old mom to go live across the world. And with Arizona, that's part of the complication there as well, is she has to come with us. I'm not gonna leave her in the cold, icy, it would be better for her to live in Arizona those months too. So
Yeah.
really, I guess the goal that I have for that is kind of based around making sure that I'm able to do it the way I want to do it and not just doing it because I can. Like, I want her to have somewhere to fit in there as well.
Yeah. I don't think I would leave my 66-year-old mother to live abroad.
Right. I mean, when your parents are getting older, I can't do it. She's not, she's widowed, so I would be leaving her by herself.
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to the cliche of like personal finance is personal, but that's another theme that's been woven throughout this conversation is you're setting your goals, you're deciding how hard to work towards them, you're deciding if it's okay to for something take 8 years instead of 5, or it's not this like hustle for the sake of hustling, hitting goals for the sake of hitting them. You can
Mhm.
change targets, you can move targets. It's just this balancing act that entrepreneurs and really everyone needs to
Mhm.
deal with. And I think there's a little too much information out there. You know, it's not like propaganda, but there's just too much coming at us about hit goals and hustle for the sake of hustling. But it's
Right.
okay to tailor your life the way you want it so that you're happy.
I think life, that is like my biggest mantra. Life should be enjoyed. And I think going back to goals, it's, because maybe my big 3 year goal is a little surprising because I want to live in Arizona January through March. But that goal pushes me on the other smaller goals. So what do I have to do to get there? So my 1 year goal is 10,000 newsletter subscribers. It's more business of how, because the money is how you do it, but the money isn't what I'm going for. I'm not doing what I'm doing for money. I'm doing what I'm doing to achieve what I want to achieve in life. And I just happen to need money to do it. So the money goals are always the supporting goals of the major goal, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I feel good wrapping there, but I do want to ask if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap up.
I think we covered quite a bit. I hope I got my points across clear and didn't just make it more confusing. But yeah, I mean, it all starts with personal finance for sure.
Why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, well, X, getting used to that still. And that's where I spend most of my time. So you can find me there at Trina Julian and then my website, trinajulian.com.
You guys can find me on Twitter X at Adulting is Easy, Instagram at Adulting is Easy Real. Don't forget to follow House Money Media on social as well. If you like this episode, you'll also like episodes 144 and 95, which are also about entrepreneurship. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Trina and I have made adulting a little easier for you.